very special guest with us today who's going to join us to talk more about this. And let me see if I can get him on. We have Jerome D'Ambrosio, who's currently driving for Formula E in the Mahindra Racing team, and he's been doing really well. So let's get him online. There you are.
Here we go.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good.
What's lockdown like for you? I can just imagine it must be extremely frustrating being at home and not behind the wheel.
Yeah, first of all, hi everyone. I hope everyone is doing well considering the circumstances. And look, well, as you said, that we've been locked down. I think it's for, in the end, it's for the best. And although it's very frustrating, we want to be racing and people want to go about with their lives. But look, I've tried to make the most out of the lockdown, and I've tried to keep myself fit. So I've been actually training more than I usually do with the traveling and so on. It's normally quite difficult to get a clear routine, and I've built that routine over the past few months. I've been in close contact with the team, obviously, using video conference methods, which actually are working, quite well. And yes, I've tried to educate myself as well, to do other things that I would not normally have the time to do.
Yeah. But do you have a gym set up at home? Because that's what a lot of people are finding really hard, getting that fitness that you get from your instructor, from going to the gymnasium, and just, managing it at home is a bit tough, especially since you're not allowed to go out most of the time.
Well, what I do actually have a simple TRX, which with the TRX you can do a lot. I don't know if I think most of people are aware of what it is. It's it's basically this kind of string that you attach on a door or anywhere with these two handles, and you can do biceps, tricep, push-ups. You can do a bit. You can be creative with the training. I use that. I use some online training methods. I do a little bit of yoga as well to stay flexible. And as I said, I'm training just differently. Happily, I can go running. So I run as well, and yeah, I do a few bits and pieces to be able to keep fit, but not with proper traditional gym equipment, just body weight. Sometimes my girlfriend's weight as well. We find some clever way to either do acro yoga or to use her weight for my biceps and so on, squats.
So some heavy lifting there.
No, it's light. In case she's listening.
Okay. So, you've been racing now from home because you're doing this virtual racing, which is racing from home. So how's that been, that experience? I mean, obviously not as great as being behind the wheel, but something different. And you find you're on the back foot there because there's so many of these gaming people that are pretty damn amazing out there.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Well, first of all, I enjoy it. I think we're doing it for a good cause. Let's start by that. And second, better online racing than no racing. I think I still enjoy it, but of course, I'm not in the car. I don't feel the G-force. It's not exactly the same. I'm 34, and clearly, compared to the 20-year-old drivers, when it comes down to gaming and so on, they've done much more of it. So we're struggling a little bit sometimes. But I'm training, I'm practicing, I'm trying to get better at it. But all around, beyond the results, of course, I'm competitive. I want to do the best I can. It's fun, and it's something to do while being on lockdown. And I definitely think it's better than nothing, and we're having some fun doing it.
That's fantastic, and for a good cause, like you said. So that's really, a thumbs up for that as well. When you talk about racing and gaming, and you mentioned your age, and I'm way ahead of you there. And I remember my session in the simulator last time when I barely managed 3 laps and got extremely sick. And I remember you consoled me by saying, hey, this happens to Nick Heidfeld too, because I was feeling really, really miserable over there. But that's a big part of the training and development. You guys really spend a lot of hours on the simulator as well. So, to all these youngsters out there who want to know how to get into racing, is it really advisable for them to spend a lot of time behind the wheel on these games and, gaming and on simulators? Does that make you a better driver behind the actual wheel of a car as well?
Well, I think that the process of finding a way to go faster, whether it's on a simulator or in a real car, it's relatively similar. The information, the cueings, my body is full of sensors, um, and that I use to feel the car in real life. Well, these sensors are not activated when I'm behind the sim. I only have a feeling, it's visual and a little bit of feeling in the steering wheel. So let's say that it doesn't hurt. It's never going to hurt to do a lot of it. For sure, you can learn a few things, and it's not going to make you worse. It only can make you better, but it definitely doesn't replace the real thing. It's not because you're fast in a simulator that you will be fast in a real car. There are components of driving a real car in terms of consequences, in terms of a few things that make it different. So do it. It's good, but you need the real thing as well.
In your career, you started off really young. I think almost 8. You were 8 when you started, getting behind the wheel of a car, and then from karting to Formula Renault to the Euro Series 3000 and GP2, and Formula One as well. So talk us through that experience, and tell these young people out there who want to get into racing, what's the steps, what's the best way to get into a career in racing?
Well, I think that, obviously it starts with go-karting. And I have to say it's a little bit unfortunate for our sports. It's not as easy as picking up a soccer ball and trying to join the local team. Unfortunately, you need some support to find a way to put your hands on a go-kart or being able to go to a go-kart track and race. Um, that's how everyone starts. And as I say, unfortunately, it's something that we still, as a sport, should look to make it more and more accessible, so that more and more we can make the talent pool bigger and give more opportunities to younger drivers. But you do that, and then once you are in that process, then things become easier. If you do perform in go-karting at an international level, then all of a sudden you're on the radar for go-karting teams or junior programs from Formula One, or I'm sure in the future from Formula E teams, to get picked up by them, be sponsored by them, and become a junior driver. Junior driver means that they're going to put you in the real thing, grow you as a race car driver, alongside often driving in their simulator to kind of groom you to what they're doing eventually. But that is the road. It's go karting. Try to do the best over there, and then hopefully someone will notice you.
Yeah, so, but it's very, very competitive. And I think that's what a lot of the youngsters have to know, that it's a very hard journey, because a lot of them think, hey, I can drive fast, I need to be a racing driver. But it is a very difficult journey, and it's also very hard. It's an expensive sport, so you need a lot of sponsorship as well. So, how did you manage that, and how do you, get that going?
Well, as I said, I was really fortunate that my parents, when I was 8, were able to buy me a go-kart and allow me to do that first season. Um, then lucky enough, or because of work, or because for whatever reason, I managed to win that first championship.
Mm-hmm.
I appeared in, and that allowed me then to directly be on the map for those teams. And they say, look, Jerome, we want you to drive for us next year. What can you do? And all of a sudden, it wasn't only me trying to go to a team and say, what do I need to bring to drive? It was more of a two-way, two parties, the team and myself, trying to find solutions so that I could drive the following year, with sponsors, with contacts, with manufacturers in go-karting. I would get the go-kart for free. I would get the engine for free. And then I would need to find money to pay for my traveling. And so it was a combination of different things like that. But what really started all, and I must say, and this is where somehow we would be amazing to make the sport more accessible, for that first step. Because without my parents giving me that opportunity to buy that first go-kart, I must say it would have been very difficult, perhaps impossible, for me to show what I could do behind the wheel.
Did you ever think that you'd land up racing for an Indian racing team, a team run by, Indian management? Did you ever think that when you got into racing?
I never thought that nothing would be impossible. I am Everything's possible, and India. I mean, it's growing. It's growing motorsport. You had a few, nine. You had You had also was driving Karun was driving also in Formula One and Formula E. We raced in India, and I raced in India in 2011, I think it was. And so I knew that the sport was growing there. It was big. There was an interest. I followed Mahindra joining Moto 2 or Moto 3. Was it one of the two? Maybe perhaps both of them at one point. And so I knew they were in the sport, and yes, as soon as I joined Formula E and there was an Indian team involved, why not? In my time of racing, India was somehow already present through drivers and sponsors.
And how has that transition been? I mean, through all the racing series and now Formula E, how different is it? You know, a lot of people have spoken about Formula E not being that exciting. There's no sound to the racing. So talk a bit about that, because when I came and saw a race, I realized how neck and neck that racing really, really is, and how crazy close, you know, people are on that grid. So talk us through the difference between, you know, your Formula One times and Formula E.
Well, I think that someone that says that Formula E is boring is clearly hasn't seen a race, and should give it a try. I think like a kid that needs to try the food that's on the table before saying he doesn't like it. It's the same thing. Just watch a race and then you'll see. I mean, it's exciting compared to Formula One. Beyond of course, there's no noise and it's a different car and so on. I mean, we've been through that quite a bit now. But in terms of atmosphere, it was very different. I mean, Formula E was a startup a few years ago. So the incentive for the whole thing to work, the drivers, the atmosphere between the drivers was very different. And then it grew with the years in it's more and more competitive. And one thing that I must say, I enjoy in Formula E, if I go back to being a race car driver, more than in any other series I've done previously, except go-karting, is the race itself, because you overtake. You can overtake. Yeah. You can start racing P20 and finish on the podium. Then in Formula E, and that's amazing in that respect. So I have a lot of fun driving, overtaking, and it's a really good, beyond a good atmosphere and the competition of it. It's a cool race to be in.
Yeah. Well, I saw that race in Paris, and racing is all about that, right? I mean, it's because it was a crazy race. You guys qualified really well. Then there was a tire pressure issue, so you were pushed to the back of the grid. And then in that crazy, crazy rain, you made yourself like right from the back of the grid to halfway up. I think almost sixth you came up to in that race. And then again, there was disappointment. So that's racing, isn't it? I mean, it's not just, you know, a lot of people think it's about being physically fit, but you've got to be mentally fit as well to handle a lot of those situations. So how do you work on that? And, you know, do you do things like meditating and things like that to be mentally fit? Because you've got to remain so calm at times.
I think it's you know, some people, we all have a different approach to mental fitness. As you say, racing is in the end a mental sport, not a physical sport. It is tough physically, but the level that you require to drive a car, if you train well, you will get to that level. And then if you're fitter than that physically, you won't make really a difference. And that level of fitness you needed to allow for your brain to work at 100% of its capacities during the race. So you're completely right by saying that the mental aspects of things are really important. In terms of mental preparation, we all have our different routines and so on. I think it's about knowing yourself, knowing where you are, and how you can change or modify a state that you're in, whether it's being too stressed, too relaxed, whatever it is. And this, personally, there's no trick for me apart from the experience gathered through 25 years of racing and knowing myself and knowing when I need to up myself, I need to calm myself. Of course, breathing techniques, you know, it's to calm yourself down, to calm your heart rate. But then, you know, it is a high, you know, it's very intensive sport in terms of the mental strength you need and the capacity that you need to have to deal with stress. It's a stressful one, but you get used to that. And in the end, you've been in that environment since you're 8. So either you've been able to cope with it, and that's why you're at the level you're at, or you haven't, and that's why you're probably not.
A lot of people asking us about rallying versus racing. They're two different kinds of drivers as well, right? So, do you want to tell them about that?
Well, I've done a rally, and I've ended up in fields and crashed a few times. It's a very different approach.
Yeah.
I mean, on the track, you know the every millimeter of the track, every centimeters. In rallying, you really have to trust that person that's next to you, giving you the pace notes. I'm not an expert, but that's what I figured out. And it's a different feeling. It's a different. It's a bit of a different beast. It's like you have a downhill skier, and then you have a freestyle skier doing jumps and backflips. You're on skis in both cases, but it's a completely different game. So yeah, I think it's different, and I definitely think though that it's easier for a rally driver to adapt to track than for a track driver to, circuit driver to adapt to rallying.
So, if it was a youngster out there wanting to get into this sport, which one would you say would be a sport that's easier to get into and step into? Like if you're new at this.
I don't think there's a difference. I think that the level of competition probably I don't want to, let's say that there's fewer championships and in rallying. I mean, in terms of it's an extreme challenge in terms of being able to drive these cars at that speed. At the same time, there's you look at a Formula E championship, you have 20 guys that can be on pole and so on. In rallying, in a way, it seems like only a few guys are always able to be up there. At the same time, it seems like it's a world with very little amount of space to become a professional race car driver. And in that way, it's perhaps even harder. I don't think that there's a clear trend in one is easier or harder. I think it's what you do, what you enjoy, and you have to try to follow your dreams. And if you enjoy driving a rally car, then you should go there. If you enjoy driving a single seater, then you should try to pursue that one.
So, I think most young boys, when they've grown up racing, for them, Formula One has kind of been the pinnacle. But now that you've seen both Formula One, Formula E, would you say that had you started off again now, would your dreams be different? Would they be on an equivalent place for you?
Well, I think that no, my dreams. I had a dream when I was a kid to reach Formula One and to drive a Formula One, and I was lucky enough to do so. I really have no regrets in that perspective. But since I was a kid and today the world has evolved, the world has changed, the reality is different, and I think Formula E now has become also a goal for young kids. And because of Formula E's relevance, and you see it's a championship with the most amount of manufacturers in the world, meaning it's a championship with the most amount of opportunities to become a professional race car driver. And so I definitely think that Formula One is very exciting. It has a history that is incredible. Those cars are incredible, and it was my dream. But I definitely think that the young generation will look at Formula E like an objective and a dream in itself as well.
Now, a lot of driving is, I think, something like skating or cycling. It comes to you inherently. So people out there are asking us, is there something that they could do to become better driver? I mean, I think practice is one thing that always makes things perfect, but what are the tips you'd like to give them?
Well, yeah, I just saw that question as well. I think that becoming a better driver, it's becoming good at something means practice and practice all over again. And sometimes you're knocked down, you're disappointed at yourself, at a situation, uh, but you have to stand back up and work and try it again, try all over again. The moment you give up is the moment you lose. And yeah, so I think keep on working. And in terms of technicality, definitely you can work a bit on the sim. If you're a go-karting driver and you need to improve yourself in the wet, well, for example, a trick that I was doing every time, it was in the beginning I was poling in the wet. And you said, I became quite comfortable in the wet, like you mentioned in
Yeah,
Paris.
yeah.
I was in the back and I managed to come back at the front. That didn't happen because I was born with a God-given talent to drive in the wet. It happened because I realized I wasn't great in the wet, And when I was go-karting in December, January in Belgium, we have plenty of rain. And every time it was wet, I would go and drive in my go-kart in the wet, and I would put my slicks tires on to make it very difficult. And all of a sudden, I became very comfortable in the wet. So practice and practicing the skills that you're perhaps not the best at, it's an important one.
Yeah. And what are the traits that you would say, a young person needs? Like we said, we've talked about physical fitness. Somebody's also asked us that, is weight a big concern? So obviously you have to stay physically fit, and weight does matter eventually when you're racing. But physical fitness, mental fitness, what are the other attributes you think they need to have?
Perseverance. Being resilient, you have to, just resilience is probably one of the most important quality in racing, I think.
Okay. It's been great talking to you, Jerome. Thanks so much for being here with us and sharing with these youngsters how to get into racing, what are the steps to get there. And we wish you a lot of luck.
My pleasure.
In virtual racing and hopefully behind the wheel sometime soon.
There's a lot of people asking for my cap, so we need to tell Dilbag to send a few and do a competition or something. So we need to send
do that.
caps.
So all of them asking for the cap, we'll definitely send out a couple to all of you.